Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us once again for session 3 of Riding the Phoenix part 4. I'm going to bring Carolyn up in just a second. But again, if you haven't joined us before, if you're having any trouble with the video feed, be sure to go up to the top right of your page and click the help button to enable compatibility mode. So after you click help, you'll see another button in there that says enable compatibility mode. And that will make sure that your internet connection can catch up with the video feed. If you still have problems after that, you can always switch over to viewing this on YouTube by clicking the green button at the bottom of the screen. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Carolyn up and have a great night and enjoy the presentation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to session 3. This session is on the role self-esteem plays in developing our capacity to love, to handle the power of love, and the role self-esteem plays. And this is huge. This is great, big, huge. So I want to jump into this subject. You know what? This is so interesting to me. I love this subject. And when I was doing the outline, I always feel like I have to calm myself down, because at this stage in my life, there's so much that I have to shrink into such a small amount of time. And I just have to tell you that it's not easy. You know, I want to share something with you. There's nothing to do with anything, but it's just a sign of the times. I went to the dentist this morning for a dental, just an ordinary kind of thing, and how times have changed. So I go in there and I have my mask, and the hygienist has her mask, and I have to, lay down on that seat for her to start her examination. And it didn't even occur to me to take my mask off. Didn't even occur to me. So she's all masked up with this plastic thing on top, and I've got my mask on. And it's like the two of us are looking at each other like, how is she? And she said, okay. And I said, okay. And it didn't even occur to me to take my mask off. And she said, how would you suggest we proceed here? And I thought, what is she talking about? And of course, I had this mask on, and it just struck me as, oh my God, I have to take my mask off. Like, it was so normal to be masked up, how things have changed. But maybe that's a good entry into how things have changed. And the point that I am trying to make really in every single session is things are changing and how they're changing. And if you think of the speed with which things have changed just this past year from this pandemic, and how different our lives are. And in a sense, the speed at which our lives are changing has a great deal to do with this theme that is so important for me to convey, that the way in which we have engaged in a relationship with power and love is in a kind of a physical way, a way that love is tactile and love is a power tool, to becoming able to channel an energetic current that has the capacity to transform others, that has the capacity to help heal the whole, that has the capacity to work on the psychic field of holism, and to change things in a blink of an eye. This is the opportunity. This is the world that we're living in. The way I want to back off and talk for a moment about how does the universe, the divine, how does it influence human evolution? How does it influence what's happening in the world? We're not going to have apparitions. We're not going to have anything like that. But what does happen is that human consciousness, the collective, begins, has downloads, and it begins to, shift gears and move in a certain direction and respond to certain inner impulses that come out of the blue. For example, in the 60s, all of a sudden, everybody began to resonate to the idea, the thought, the concept that we co-create reality. It just started. It caught on. It caught fire, as if there was a electric download that inspired the whole. And another thought form, another truth that just kind of downloaded into the collective was this template of holism. Become whole now, move toward holism, move toward becoming whole. And out of that idea of holism came the body, mind, spirit template, came the way you now approach your health, how you approach your body, how you think about so many things in terms of the whole, of holistic, how you approach probably your food and your nutrition holistically, where did that come from? But all of a sudden, holistic, whole, thinking in terms of whole, that is the new template, as if that's the way of this age of energy. Energy is whole. You can't chop it up. You can't divide it. Things don't get divided until they become physical matter. Now, this is really important. Think of it like mist. Mist, you can't divide mist. You can't chop it up. It's not choppable until it descends into physical matter like rain and then becomes water, and water is frozen into ice. And then you can chop up the ice when it matterizes. I made that word up. When it matterizes. And because we're moving into this era of energy, it's essential for us to start thinking like in the laws of energy and in the power of energy. So we have this download about body, mind, spirit. We have this download about becoming whole. We have these thoughts about the whole planet. We develop this internet technology that's putting us in touch with the whole. We are always moving toward the whole. So, in keeping with that, we have to evolve our capacity to embrace life holistically. We have to open up our inner net, our inner network, to include the whole. In a way, we have to discover the power of love that could flow through us to the whole, versus the lesser way where we are intimidated by others, by people in the world, by that approach. In moving toward holism, it's as if the universe is organizing so many things that contain this directive. And this is how organic divinity works. There's no apparition on any mountain telling us, but everything is telling us that we have to find a way to work together, to unify in the whole. And when I say tap into the power of love. Let me be very clear here that I am not referring to any kind of sentimental love. I'm talking about the life force, the power of the life force that we tap into, recognizing this life force belongs to all of us. And maybe it's even better to use that and put the word love on the side for a moment, that it's the power of the life force itself that when we experience it personally, we call it love. But when we experience it impersonally, it it feels like love, but it's bigger than love. It's the life force itself, and it belongs to everybody. It belongs to all life. And it is that force that has the capacity to rejuvenate a planet, to rejuvenate, to to heal things, to heal diseases that ordinary means cannot do. So I think it is not a coincidence. It does not strike me the least bit peculiar at all that as we must move into holism, that we are confronting one challenge, one predicament, one incredible, they're not problems, they're collective challenges and crises after another that require the whole of us to resolve in order for them to be resolved, from climate change to environmental problems to pandemics to, and I would add this to the list, to psychic illnesses and epidemics, the diseases that the sufferings that human beings are now facing on the emotional, psychic level that are reverberating through all of our societies, the collective depressions, the collective anxieties that we are all feeling and that are permeating through our collective, that as they go into our youth, are causing epidemics of suicide, epidemics of prolonged malaise and addiction that are in fact crippling so many people. So the choices made that do not support becoming whole or healing in a whole way are choices that the choices to move in the direction of fracturing, of staying, of choosing power over the life force will maintain crisis for us, as it will maintain crisis for you personally. If I shrink this down to you personally, which I'm about to do, so you understand that what is in one is in the whole, and that I'm going to make this very practical now. And I'm going to take it down through your personal archetypes. So I need you to feel this love and these choices within the grit of your life. And that brings us to the subject of where self-esteem comes in, and why self-esteem is this critical inner developmental stage that defines is the defining characteristic of who we are. I mean, if we looked at certainly my parents or people prior to, let's say, the 60s, even certainly the 60s, that people had certainly a sense of dignity and self-respect and identity and that ego health, that kind of thing. But self-esteem and the idea of self-empowerment and self-development, the development of the self as we know it, and the inner self, that was not a thing. That was not something that was common, that was not spoken of. I mean, I cannot even imagine my parents or my father saying something like, well, I have to get in touch with my inner self. I mean, nothing could be more preposterous. Nothing. But we require it. So I need to talk about the significance of where did that come from? Why did this inner self anomaly just blast into us, these generations post-nuclear age, that and that self-esteem is such a critical part of our well-being, our relationships, our health, our inner self, our sense of self. Where did that come from, and why is that such a critical part of you developing who you are? Why? What is that all about? And what does that have to do with your capacity to really love and empower other people and be at a place where you can detach from, move beyond this need for power? And by that I mean, in this world where love is a battlefield, life is a battlefield, it's about winning competition. It's about I can't love that person too much or like that person too much. It's all based on this exchange of who has what power. If I give them too much power, if I empower them too much, they might leave me. If I support them too much, they might take off. I can only I can only love to the extent that it doesn't threaten me. Love is measured in power units in the lower part of the hourglass. It's measured in power units to maintain security, survival security. That is how love is measured. People will stay in relationships without love because of security, because it has to do with, well, I'll exchange my safety. I don't need love. I love my safety more than this. So it's the power of safety. You see, what I mean by love is negotiated in the bottom half of our hourglass by what physically matters. So love is a physical currency in the bottom half of your hourglass. It is negotiated. Like how many times I have been with people in workshops who know that their partner, for example, is committing adultery, stepping out on them. And in order to cope with that, they lower, they dampen, they anesthetize how they feel, their love, and they increase their need for security. And that's what they develop. They transfer their affection to their need for security, which softens the wounds of the heart. And they kind of do this negotiation for this power over that power. Security over love. this, what we will do to keep our physical world the way it is, oftentimes determines the extent to which we allow ourselves to feel the force of love. I need to explain that again. It's a big, great, big, huge, big deal. Love is, this is such a powerful force. It is so transforming within us and around us that we in all of its forms, whether it's romantic love, compassionate love, empathy, all of its variation, it's so powerful that oftentimes, in order for us to maintain control over the way our world is, we have to turn down our capacity to feel love, to feel any variation of it, compassion, sympathy, empathy, whatever it is. We have to turn it to its lowest capacity, lowest burner, lowest vibration, the lowest way you want to feel it. And we do that because if we felt too much, we would then have to, the heart forces us to take action to do something about a situation. It won't leave us alone. Love comes through like a tsunami. That's why it's the life force. It's not just, love is not passive. It's this active, I've got to do something. I can't live with myself unless I reconcile, unless I transform. Love is a transforming force. You see someone harmed or hurt or this or that, and if it floods through, if it comes through, it will not let you rest, because love is not the right word. It is life force. It is this divine life force, and it floods through you, and it longs to transform, whether it is a relationship or a friendship or the suffering of people. It doesn't matter. The life force, when it flows through you, its intention is to make better whatever has been targeted, whatever your heart has spotted, it longs to transform that. And yourself included, which brings me to the subject of self-esteem, to the subject of holism, to the subject of this moment, and I have to put it all together. In this moment of this cosmic dictate, of this era in which we are being on this journey toward a different level of consciousness, which we are, and that the constant impulse of this era is become whole, become healthy. Look, you can't turn on the TV and not get commercials for vitamins, this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter if they're just 2-bit commercials. There's still, the theme is become healthy, become conscious of your health, become this, become that, go out and exercise. You can't see it anyway. A Peloton or Pelican, a Pelican, whatever, it's a bike. And it's always this exercise, doing something, always working out. Penguins? What? I don't know what it is. It's a bicycle you get on and it talks to you. And every single thing is about personal development, consciousness, it's every single place you look. It is this message of take charge and become whole. Take charge and become whole. but at a deeper level. And this is the jewel. At a deeper level, it is about becoming strong and whole and aware of the nature of our power, becoming whole, taking charge of the whole of yourself, taking charge of the power of your breath, the power of your thoughts, the power of what you believe, the power of you. Self-esteem emerged out of that. The inner self, our language, emerged out of that. And it really, at the therapeutic level, it's all about, processing. But at the holy level, at the power level, it's about developing the consciousness that you are in charge and responsible for the power that is your being. That's it. You're the one in charge. You're the one in charge of this whole force field, the life force that runs through you. You're the one, only you. And you're the one that has to be mindful of how it is you distribute this life force that is you into acts of creation. You. That is what life is, how we distribute our incredible power into acts of creation. Now, we can dilute our power, let others take charge of it out of fear, dilute it into tribal stuff. I'll get to that in a minute, but and dilute it into group fear patterns, group belief patterns, and agree with what everybody else thinks, and let our energy just charge off like that. But we're never okay with that. We're never okay with that. If you sit back, you realize that who you are and what you truly want and how you truly want to be is empowered enough to close your eyes and say a prayer that says, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do with this gift of life you've given me? Take me down deep. I want to listen and hear the instruction. What do you want me to do? And you actually want, in your heart of hearts, to be courageous enough to hear the instruction and follow it without first thinking, what will they say? What will they say? Will they think I'm crazy? You, in your heart of hearts, I know it. You truly want to be able to hear God call you by name. Feel that sense of guidance and trust it more than anything you see in that world of physical power. You want the world behind your eye, the world of this inner, mystical, energetic reality. This world, you want that world to be more real for you because you know it's more real. You want those lines of communication to be so clear and so real that you close your eyes and you say, what do you want? What am I doing here? Help me out here. How do I help that person? Tell me what to do. And even if it's this slight gut feeling, go just sit next to that person. I think I'm going to just go sit next to that person. Because the moment you do, grace starts radiating through you. And that's all you need to do is sit next to that person, because you know heaven will take care of the rest. Heaven will take care of the rest. You know exactly how the invisible holy world works, but you trust it because you know how the unseen world works now. You know exactly how it works. That's what I believe people really want. They want that kind of trust. They want to know that kind of power. They want to know the power that is love. They want to know that. They want to know, and they want it running through them. They want that current of life force running through them, because they know, every one of us knows, that's the current that makes all the difference in life. That's the one. That's the one. And what we are living through is this transition. And in order to become someone, in order to get to that place, we have to go through the scaffolding of self-esteem. Self-esteem, this hybrid ego. It's more than the ordinary ego. It's more than the ordinary ego people have lived off of for years and decades and centuries. No, 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 no. The kind of self, inner self, that's emerging in us now is a kind of a hybrid, and it is a inner self that is almost an inner companion, an inner consciousness, an inner, it's almost like a part of you that journeys within you and journeys outside of you, and is more than just your conscious mind. It is a part of you that goes searching for your fragments, that goes searching for where you have left your power. And it comes back and it says to you, this makes you feel powerless. You have to do something about that. You have to do something. You can't. It is like a Geiger counter that alerts you to your power, to what your power is, to the fact that you are a system of power that you need to understand, protect, work with, recognize, and hold in esteem, to esteem the self. And so in my work as a medical intuitive, I'm sorry, I have to take a sip here. In my work as a medical intuitive, what I realized was that the development of the inner self and self-esteem was really all about our relationship to power, and how we related to our and management of power in, first of all, the physical world, but then eventually how we handled our relationship to ourself and our capacity to protect ourselves, to trust ourselves, to then make choices that actually, you go from trying to protect yourself from being disempowered, which is the first stage of self-esteem, to actually having enough esteem to make power choices that actually empower you. And then the third, which is to have that incredible sense of self where you can put yourself, utilize yourself to empower others. Those are the stages. First, you have to empower yourself, in almost recover, heal yourself. The first stage of self-esteem is to figure out, recover and piece yourself back together from being fractured. And the second is to learn how to make empowered inner choices. So first is external, then is inner, personal inner choices. But then the big leap, which is the leap to becoming a vessel of the life force, love life force power on behalf of where you really get into your higher self, your high potential, where you become a servant to the whole, where you become literally a servant to the whole, not of service, but a servant to the whole. Thy will be done, where you become, where do you want me? That level of self-esteem is that level of humbleness, where you are no longer interested in the task, but the channeling. You are interested in what kind of life force does this situation need, not is this situation good enough for me. That's the difference. That's the difference. Of course, the situation is going to be bad. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Otherwise, this is going to be a mess. Otherwise, you wouldn't need someone here to make it better. Of course. So I'm no longer concerned with whether a situation is good enough for me. Am I here in what way can I make it better? And if it's a really bad situation, you must think I can channel some badass life force. Otherwise, you wouldn't send me here. So that's how you ought to look at it. You must think, boy, you must send me with some powerful angels or I wouldn't be in this mess. You got to understand how heaven works. So what I learned was that there are 4 archetypal patterns, more than any other that I had seen, that seem to be what I would call the legs of a table. And the top of the table is like self-esteem. But that these legs have to be put on the table. They have to be put on the table. And that each of these, that like a table, the table requires all 4 legs. So building self-esteem is not something we do once. It's like a constant little dance we do. But that these 4 archetypal ingredients tend to be present in a situation where we can feel our sense of self being tested. So it's good to kind of know that in some way these 4 archetypal patterns are going to be involved. What's also good to know is that these 4 are involved with everybody. What's also good to know is that these 4 are really part of the reason people make choices that create suffering for themselves. Yeah. That where they compromise themselves, where they find themselves with deep regrets. So I have to hit a pause button here. If I could say that to you with an illustration of your power, what would that look like? What would that look like? What I just said to you. Making choices that compromise yourself. What did I just say? If you had to illustrate that in terms of your energy. I wish I was a magician. You have to get this. You have to. I am screaming at you and I'm dancing up and down. You have to get this, okay? You have, this could be the most important thing I teach you forever and ever. You have energy going in through the top of your head. You are in this field. So if you stuck your hands out, right, and you do this, you're in this energetic bubble, but you actually are. And that's the size of you. So it's just like this and up and all the way down. So you essentially you're in a bubble, but it's your bubble, okay? And if I were to walk up behind you and you didn't hear me and I just kind of slipped into your bubble, you would go like this, ooh, because you would feel my electricity and I would feel yours, even if you didn't hear me or see me. But the electrical charge is there. So you know you have electricity, you have energy. You have life force coming into you all the time. All the time. So you're just constantly plugged into the life force, okay? It's constant. You're just constantly plugged in to the life force. Now, what I learned as a medical intuitive, and I cannot tell you how I was just mesmerized by this. I mean, mesmerized. That when you make a choice, so you make a choice. I have to have this cup. I just have to have the cup. If I don't have that cup, I'm just going to die. Okay? It looks like a choice. You can see someone make the choice. You can hear them. You can watch all that. But what you cannot see and cannot measure is the energetic part of a choice that you see physically. Now, the lower half of the hourglass, the energetic dynamic that is also part of every action. So all of the interactions that we have, all the choices we make, all the thoughts we have, all the beliefs we have, all the attitudes we have, all of the puts that we are comprised of, all the things we dislike, all the things we judge, all the that make us everything. We're sparking all the time. Sparking all the time. All of that utilizes our energy all the time. It utilizes our energy. We're like sparking all the time. Now, imagine that like my whole life depended on buying this mug because I had to have it and I saw it and I wanted it and that was it. And I get to the store and I see someone else get that mug ahead of me. And let's say that I'm like a mugologist and I just can't cope with it. I just can't cope. I can't, here's the expression, let it go. What does that mean? I can't let it go. I start doing a narrative. I can become convinced that that other person knew I wanted the mug, never met me, never saw me. But I tell myself, I bet you that person knew I wanted that mug. Arrived at the store 10 minutes early, waited for me, waited so she could see, make sure I saw her buy it, do a whole narrative, because that's what we do. And in the spinning of this narrative, what's actually happening is all my energy, all this energy is actually leaving my bubble, and it's creating this narrative, and that narrative becomes a living thing. That narrative becomes a living energetic force, like a collection of psychic free radicals that exist in my field and then in the greater field because I'm attaching it to her. And this becomes part of what drains my energy, what continues it. And this becomes part of my energetic reality. And this becomes how I shape my sense of power. That my sense of power, my sense of who I am, is based on what I can what I can get, what I can get my hands on when I want it. If I can get it, when I have to get something, when I love something, I have to get it then and there, because that's what I do when I love something. This is that kind of love and power and contact. And this is my idea of what makes me stable and controlled. And that threw a wrench in my wheel, and that disempowers me. Now, in terms of my sense of self-esteem, it's based on my capacity to control other people, to control her, to control and get what I want, to get what I want when I want it. That sense of self. When in fact, I have no control over myself. I have none whatsoever. I have no control. The fact that everything else has control over me. Everything else. Everything around me has control. So all of that is controlling my sense of who I am. And this is which keeps me vulnerable, which keeps me frightened, which makes my capacity to love a very vulnerable, frightened dynamic. And what I've learned is that in the development of self-esteem, the archetypal patterns that seem to be the first ones we have to encounter in ourselves are the child, the saboteur, the prostitute, and the victim. And I'm going to walk us through those now. And that these 4 archetypes are ones that we engage with every single time we write a narrative about why we're losing power. Every single time we encounter any illusion in the outside world, anything that threatens our sense of self, that threat will involve in some way one of those 4 or all of them together. And that the journey to developing ourself, our sense of self, includes our capacity to mature the inner child in us, to find ways to make it through feeling as a victim, to feeling victorious, to trust that we can protect ourselves. The saboteur has its own lessons that I'm going to explain, but each one of these 4 archetypes in their way are meant to empower us. And as we understand what their role, that sense of self in us solidifies, and that sense of that capacity to take charge of our power emerges. So I'm going to describe these 4. I also want to say something, and this is an aside, but it's an interesting aside because it's important. Because it overlaps a little bit with these 4 archetypes. In Buddhism, Buddhism doesn't have the idea of hell the way they do in Christianity, certainly Catholicism or whatever. But it does have a concept that represents their idea of what hell is. And hell in Buddhism is feeling completely powerless, completely without any power at all. Like if you were arrested and no one knew where you were, and you were in some prison and even you didn't know where you were, and you weren't allowed to call anybody or contact anybody, and you find yourself in a cell and the door is locked. And that's our idea of hell, the most frightening thing in the world. That powerless thing, that. And that, even there, Buddha would say, but you still have the capacity to choose how to be within yourself, within that room, within. You still have that. Now, I add that here because as we go through these 4 archetypes, even within Buddhism, was this brilliant teaching that the development of the self is everything. The development of our capacity to withdraw ourselves from the illusions of the world, from thought forms or ideas or fears that the group has, to take our power out of that. To say, I'm not going to let you, I am not going to support that idea with my energy. I will not. I will not energize that fear. I will not do that. To be strong enough to stand up and say, I know that that's not true. And I'm not going to participate in that. To be strong enough to not participate in an illusion when you see so many others participate in it, knowing that I will not send my energy into that thought form to keep that thought form going. I will not do it. I won't do it. That takes so much self-esteem. That's when you realize what the power of your power, that you realize I'm not, that's not going to happen. I will not be attached to that, because then my soul is attached to the consequences of that, to the consequences of that insurrection, to the consequences of I will not attach myself to the energy of that. I will not. And the capacity to be able to withdraw from thought forms that this is simply not the truth, and to seek truth in order to empower yourself as you journey higher and higher into mystical or universal truths. That sense of power within you becomes illuminated, enlightened. Your vocabulary changes. Your sense of self becomes a candle in the night. And trust me, people find you. So let me go into these archetypes, because these are already in you. And you have already encountered numerous times this some version of these archetypal patterns active within you. And you will probably many times. Everybody has a child archetype. Everybody, the child archetype has many expressions. Many, there's the wounded child, the abandoned child, the magical child, the nature child, the invisible child. There's so many child archetypes, and we have a mixture. I know for a fact I don't have the nature child. There's no way I'm going in nature and sitting there but I'm a great gardener. but I don't consider that my magical child. But I just don't play in nature. I garden in nature, but that's as far as it goes. But when I see um, people who are so comfortable in their skin, jumping in pools and jumping in ponds, and I think, what is that like? I do not have that in. It's like a foreign. I did. What are you doing? I can't even. I so don't have that pattern. A very common archetype that I see, child archetype that I see so often now, is the wounded child, the abandoned child, the invisible child. These archetypal patterns are probably the most common that I experience in my workshops. And that inner child, the child archetype, is obviously the part that is very fragile, that is very that wants someone to take care of them, that wants someone to take on the responsibility for them, that wants someone to, here, you do it for me, please take care of this for me, please, I don't want to grow up, I don't want to grow up. It's that part that in all of us, there's a part of us that says, is it time for me to grow up? Do I really have to? I don't want to. I don't really want to. Do I have to? That's the child that says, I just want someone else to help me out here, that child. And then the other part of that child within us is the part that somehow has this innocence that, I don't know, maybe something will work out magically. It's just going to magically happen because that's what happens, because there's magic in the world. Because, and a different word for magic when you pray is called a miracle. And it's children that I think of the Madonna, she always appears to children, that there's that the faith of a child, that kind of, well, how come it can't happen? That's the way they see it. I don't understand, how come it can't happen? Adults think, how can it possibly happen? And a child thinks, well, how come it can't happen? So it's this archetype, the challenge of the child when it comes to self-esteem, is the fear of growing up, the fear of going into the world and finding a way of survival, the fear of that, the fear of, how will I survive on my own? How will I do that? How will I take care of myself? How will I do that? The idea of taking care of myself is terrifying to the wounded child inside. And the challenge of healing those wounds is another part of the building of self-esteem, that it requires this confrontation with the wounds in childhood and somehow bringing them into one's adulthood in order for them to be healed. That the wounds of the child, though they happen to the child, almost have to be taken from the child into your adultness in order to be healed. So that if we let the child in us take charge of situations when we're frightened, we won't trust that we could handle that situation. Anyway, the child is, and if we listen to the child will always tell us to go home and hide in some way, to back off if we don't bring the child into our adultness. The victim, I want to pause here and just say, I've had so many instances when I've been teaching, and I realized that while the person walked in one of their archetypal patterns, that the moment they started to talk about their wounds or their history, a whole nother archetype took over. Their physical looks changed, their body language changed, and sometimes their voice changed. And I realized that I was, in fact, dealing with a child archetypal pattern that had complete control over this person. And one time, the person at a lunch break went to his room and brought back a teddy bear and was sitting in my workshop with a teddy bear. And I almost short circuited. I said, "Are you kidding me? But I had to take control of myself, because not only was I the teacher, but I actually realized that 67-year-old man was a 7-year-old for all practical purposes. That's how strong the archetypal pattern is. He was actually, for all intent and purposes, 7 years old. And our archetypal patterns are that strong. These are governing psychic patterns that play us like marionettes, that they have that much influence over us. You may think, that where are they, and they don't exist, and I'm much stronger than some psychic pattern. No, you're not. No, you're not. Not at all. No. And I'll tell you how strong they are. One of the things everybody does, absolutely everybody, you and everybody else, is the moment you're in a restaurant, the moment you're in public, the moment you're anywhere, everybody you look at, you do archetypal readings. You'll think, that person looks like this. That person looks like, I bet that person's good at this. I bet that person's a geek. I bet that person's a good business person. Oh, that woman looks like a good mother. Da, 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 da. All of that, you could call it labeling people. Labels are another word for an archetype. You are doing archetypal readings, and believe it or not, you're spot on. Very, very rarely do you miss. People don't get the more shadow archetypes. Sometimes someone will say, that person looks like a con artist. Isn't that a typical con artist? What do you mean typical? But you get the hit. But people won't get, like, that person feels like a pirate to me. I mean, and it could be pirating all stuff off the internet, right? You won't pick up archetypes you're not that familiar with, or you don't think in terms of, because you're not quite sure how that archetype that you associate with being on the water 200 years ago actually has evolved into contemporary piracy. So you won't pick that up. But you are constantly doing archetypal readings because your psychic field speaks archetypes fluently. Your psyche recognizes archetypes fluently. And you are always matching and like they're like signals. You're always partnering with people, attracted to people through your archetypes, repelled, thinking, I have no attraction to that person whatsoever. I don't want to talk to that person. I've got to talk to that person. These are archetypal signals going out. Ding, 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 ding. A knight spots a ding, ding, ding princess. And it's like that. This is just what happens. So when you think, no, I'm not, so I just don't know how this trust me, this is how it works. And in your own archetypal nature, your child has so much to do with whether or not you see yourself as able to survive in the world and able to how you speak to yourself, whether or not you feel like you can walk out that door and trust yourself as an adult in the world, whether you feel like an adult, whether you feel strong and can handle that. That's your child. If you have this voice and say, oh, I just can't do it. I just don't. I can't. And a child talking to you, that is this archetype. That is this archetype. And if I were to talk to you and say, why do you feel that way? Trust me when I tell you, you would pull out a childhood injury, wound, or something. You would not speak like a prostitute. You would not use a saboteur. You would not use another one of your archetypes. You would pull out something from childhood to explain why you don't feel safe being an adult in the world, because it's a child question. So in order to develop that sense of self, and what's such a big deal out of it, why this is such a big deal, is because when we don't have a sense of self, we hand over our energy to others to distribute, to use. We hand it over. We abdicate. We let others, we allow ourselves to be bullied. We allow ourselves to be used. We allow our precious energy, life force, we sign it over through commitments, through contracts, through obligations, through bad marriages, through lousy partnerships, through working for organizations we don't believe in. We give our energy to that because we're children and we don't feel safe being on our own. So we form these surrogate parental partnerships of sorts. And the whole time we're seething with resentment. We're seething with it because we can feel someone talking to us. How do you feel when someone says to you, oh, this just happened to me. This just happened to me. Where someone says to you, you don't really know what you're talking about. You don't really know let me make this decision for you. Let me do this. And the next thing you know, your whole choice mechanism, everything is taken from as if you were 3 years old, and it's appropriate for a parent to do that for a 3-year-old, but not for you. And you feel your choice power going right out of your mouth and into their hands. And you sit there like this, except you feel it. You feel your power going. And it's just whoosh, right? And what do you do then? You think, all you can think about is how to get your power back. I've got to go get my power back. And here's the thing. That's exactly right. You do. Because what self-esteem is all about is the having enough esteem, having enough self to manage yourself. To manage yourself. So that you find that you have to go up to a person and say, can I have myself back? Can I have that circuit back? Can I have that back? Thanks. I'll take charge of myself now. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't want to go through that again. And that was my fault. I can't get mad at you. I wasn't strong enough to protect myself, which brings us to the victim. So you see, that's the role of the child. Victim. No one is born with self-esteem. Let us be very clear here. And I want to point out something else. So long as we are in the stage of developing ourselves at this level, really, at this level, so long as we don't have our sea legs with self-esteem, so long as we don't have that larger self, we're still fractured, we're still trying to manage our power in bits and pieces, we're still in that lower world trying to get our act together. It is very, very difficult to empower another person. It's very, very difficult to truly empower another person or other people, because the object is it's empowering the self is hard enough. It's hard enough. And so the idea of doing kindness for others is fine. For example, there's a weather crisis and people need blankets or they need food. That's not difficult. That's not difficult. But we are living in an era in which it isn't food and blankets that's getting redistributed. It's power. Power everywhere. Power. The whole template of power is getting redistributed from nature's power to the energetic system. The whole Megillah of power is getting redistributed on the grid of life. And if we decided, you know what, let's all leave this planet for 20 years and then come back, it's going to be a very different place. It's going to be a very different place. And how power is getting distributed to nations, to people, it's going to look very different. It really is. And so we're giving someone blankets and food is one level of help. But you have to have a whole different quality of self to actually up your capacity to channel the life force and empower people versus give them a blanket, where you're empowering them to change their lives, not just feed them for a day. That's two different levels of power. Because by changing their lives, they can change your life. And that's a different level of transformation. That will transform everything. And that's a level of power that a lot of people can't reach. And that's the level that this time in life we're being asked to stretch ourselves to reach. The victim archetype. Everyone is born needing to go through the stages of confronting what it is like to feel like a victim, to develop a capacity to protect themselves in the early stages, in the bottom of the hourglass. It always feels like protect our bodies, protect our physicalness, protect all of that, which has something to do with it. But it's also about all that is involved in developing a sense of self-trust. This is an archetype that is very tied in to your gut instinct, to your capacity to trust in yourself. Not so much the child, but your inner victim or victorious, whether or not you trust your own gut instincts. Am I going to be victimized here? What's going on here? What's going on here? Who do I trust? The outside or the inside? When I'm a really, really, really good medical intuitive. I'm really good. And I'm not and I've heard people say, that, things like that like my skill is a gift and all that other. And I will never believe that so long as I live. I deeply believe that the reason I am good at what I do is because of self-esteem. It's because I esteem my own gut instinct and my intuitive knowledge. It's because I respect my inner workings. It's because I trust that. And it's because I have such a deep inner rapport with this. Your inner rapport is built upon you learning to trust your conscience and your inner instincts, and especially when it comes about, am I going to be victimized here? Regardless of the situation, even if it comes down to, should I eat this? Will this food victimize my body? You have to start trusting, build in small ways. And as you feel more victorious, little by little, you develop this sense of esteem for your own opinion, for your own regard, I just trust what I feel. I just trust what I feel. And when forces on the outside come towards you, when say, you got to believe this person's this person's that, and you refer to the inside, that is an assault on you. And you think, is that negativity going to victimize what's in you? And you run it past your gut and you trust what that says. This is how you build self-esteem. It's like one small victory at a time. So many people in that early stage of developing the self, they oftentimes go through the stage of being very verbal about, it's the verbal stage. Things like, these are having to announce what their boundaries are, having to announce that you can't, I don't want to be spoken to like that. Having to announce, it's not a tone of voice you can use. Having to announce, and that feels like self-esteem, when in fact, it's such an exercise in fragility, but it's essential. And yet what it is that very first stage of saying, I'm afraid I'm going to be victimized, so I'm going to announce right now. It's like putting your hands up. Don't come near me. Don't come near me. Because if you come near me, I won't be able to protect myself. I won't. Gradually, as you develop your sense of self, that self becomes such a strong light, you don't have to say anything. Nobody would consider violating your boundaries. by simply the force of the light that you radiate. By simply the force of the light. Nobody would consider crossing it because there's something about the light you radiate. That's the difference. Okay. The saboteur is another archetypal pattern we have. And no, I'm not done with it. There's so much. Christ Jesus, I wish we were here all night. The victim in self-esteem. Well, we also victimize ourselves. And I just want to mention that we can victimize ourselves in 1,000 million ways too. And one of the ways is the way we think about ourselves to ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves about if you get up angry, you've already begun to victimize yourself for the day. If you get up and you talk to yourself like, this will never work, this is awful, and this brings up the saboteur. And these two work as a team. And the way you can sabotage your own opportunities. So the victim, where you can victimize yourself by the way you talk to yourself. So you don't have to wait for others to do it. You don't have to wait. So if there's any part of you that's participating in anything like that, I want you to just, hit a pause button and say, why do I do that? Why do I talk to myself that way? And realize that what you are doing from a totally different cosmic point of view is you are sabotaging your own precious self-esteem. You are sabotaging your own capacity to run the life force. You're sabotaging your whole relationship to your capacity to really be a vessel of transformation. And I'm telling you, here's another jewel. If I ever wrote another book on health, if I ever did, now what I would say is a tremendous cause of anxiety and stress, and I cannot prove this. I cannot, which is why I'm not sure I'd ever write it, but this is what I suspect. And if it doesn't feel right to you, throw it on the floor. But I am right. And that's that we are meant to receive guidance. We are meant to receive this life force constantly. We are meant. We are not meant to sabotage it. We are not meant to victimize ourselves. We're not meant to do that. We are meant to move through these challenges and to let that life force come through us and enhance the lives of others. That's what we're meant to do. And when we repress the life force, that's like turning off water. When we repress the life force, I am convinced that we repress the very light force that nourishes our body. I think it increases aging. I think that it increases the psychological anguish. I think it is it's harmful in subtle homeopathic ways that we have yet to recognize. But it is exactly what we should not do. And I think that because then what we do is we end up repressing our instincts toward each other. And we end up being afraid to empower each other. We end up not doing accurate. We end up being afraid of each other and afraid of being vulnerable with each other. We end up operating exactly the opposite of how we should be with each other. The saboteur. You know, the saboteur is not about some ghoul hiding in the closet that comes out and goes, "Boo." It's not that at all. The saboteur is this archetypal pattern. It's so fascinating. It's this archetypal pattern that in us that makes us sabotage our own empowerment, that makes us sabotage our own journey of expanding ourselves, that makes us deliberately withdraw from opportunities in life, that makes us deliberately, blow up our own parties. And why would we do that? That's what I cannot believe we're out of time. I can't. I still have to do the prostitute. Who's been talking too much? Okay, we're gonna jump in tomorrow with the saboteur and the prostitute, because I have to continue this tomorrow is self-esteem and intuition. So we'll take it into intuition. So it's a perfect way for me to start tomorrow, because we'll just continue the flow of this. I knew it wouldn't fit into one, so I've given it 2 classes, so I'm not going to hit the panic. But so we'll just start with the saboteur and all that is. In the meantime, I want to close with a prayer. And I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. I really do have to figure out a way to squish down so I don't get so excited. Okay. Settle down. This prayer is called the Power of Miraculous Love. I took a long walk with you this morning, Lord, and contemplated the power of love in the midst of violence around us and within us. Love has endless expressions. It's personal, impersonal, cosmic, sacred, holy. It's all those forces and so much more. Love is that mysterious thread from the heart that binds us to someone no matter where they are, even after they've returned home to you. Love never evaporates. I love my family members who have passed as much as if they were still with me. Time, space, and the transition of life make no difference. And yet, do we really trust that power of love? I'm not certain that we do. Perhaps in small ways, but these are the times that call for miraculous love, the real thing. We need to love big time and with no exceptions. We need to love with our hearts on the line. We need to crack open and discover what and who we are capable of loving in this time of chaos. Ultimately, that choice comes down to trusting you, Lord. And perhaps this extreme time of social unrest will activate in us a power of collective love unlike anything we've ever experienced before. A love of humanity, a love of our planet, a love of all living creatures. That is the quality of love these times call for. Tsunamis of love can transform everything. I believe that. I believe we can heal the wounds of the past and the ongoing horrors occurring each day in front of our eyes. You will not do this work for us. You will not save us from our fear of discovering the power of love. I know that. Maybe the first miracle we need to experience is to break through our own fear of loving without borders. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow. Good night.